Today we have Rachel Franchina uh, with us. Rachel, why don't you tell us what you do, where you're from, and your title, and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me. I love talking to students, so I look forward to hearing some questions. I work for the U.S. Forest Service, and I'm based in Colorado. I live in a community called Evergreen, Colorado, which is just southwest of the Denver metro area, but up in the mountains or foothills of Colorado. And I work out of our regional office, which is in Lakewood, Golden. Golden is where the Coors Brewery is, if you've ever heard of that. um, and I am it's actually a new position for me. I am the Continental Divide Trail Administrator. And the Continental Divide Trail, or CDT for short, is a 3,100-mile trail from Mexico to Canada along the Continental Divide.
So, and how long have you? So, you said that's a new position. How long have you held that position?
Officially a few days, but I've been doing it for a few months. It's so kind of unofficially for about 3 months. Paperwork took a little while to catch up, and yeah, so it's pretty new position for me.
Awesome. I did not know that.
Yeah, yeah.
Where are you originally from?
Well, you guys or y'all, my roots are in Fort Smith and Memphis. I grew up in Fort Smith and Memphis. How many Fort Smith people do we have in the house?
I'm sure there's
We probably have a few,
plenty.
don't we?
The so, and I knew that you had some connections to Little Rock too from previous conversations. Um, so, as far as moving forward with your life, so to speak, where did you go to school, and what kind of stuff did you study?
Yeah, good. So when I went to college, I we had moved to Fort Smith when I was in high school, and so I wanted to go back to Memphis. I'm not sure why, but I was just really, like I'm going to go back there. So I went to the University of Memphis my first year of college, and I didn't know what I wanted to major in. I knew I loved natural resources. I was always an outdoorsy kid. I grew up in Arkansas, just running around the rivers and trails in Arkansas. So I was kind of like, oh, I'll major in geology, and I took some geology classes. That was fun. I loved history and English. I had all sorts of interests. So
Yeah.
I was on the 5-year plan. During my first year there at University of Memphis, I met up with a lady who told me about this national student exchange program. And I had really wanted to go to college in Colorado, and my parents are like, "No way, we're not paying state
Right.
tuition in
Right.
Colorado." And so I was looking at I think I was looking at Colorado State
Hmm.
for forestry, but they dropped out of that program. So I kind of had honed in on something around natural resources and forestry. So Colorado State dropped out of the program. So this lady said, "Why don't you look at University of Montana?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's so far away, right? Here I am, this Southern girl. Like, I'm going to go to Montana." But I did. So I did the exchange for a year. But I had already transferred too. Like my heart was out west. I just had always loved kind of the landscape to the west. So I transferred to the University of Montana. I did get a degree. I took my intro to natural resources class, and discovered recreation management. And so I got my degree in natural resources recreation from the School of Forestry. Then, because that wasn't enough, I went and got a master's. And I took a year off, and I know one of the questions about things I've done, so I'll talk a little bit about that when my year
Yeah.
off and other things. But then I went to Virginia Tech for my master's degree, also in natural resource recreation, from the School of Forestry, or School of Natural Resources and Environment, I think is what it's called now.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, and so with that, you talked about some of your experiences. Do you want to talk about some of those and kind of your professional path to get where you are?
Yeah, yeah. So like I was saying, like I was always an outdoorsy kid. So, growing up between Memphis and Fort Smith, we had lived in Fort Smith when I was little too. And my dad, in particular, super outdoorsy, just like he was part of that 70s back to nature movement. And in fact, my dad wrote the canoeing and kayaking guide for Arkansas, for the Ozarks. So if any boaters are out there, and you may not have seen it, it's kind of an old edition now, but it's the only book in print for canoeing in Arkansas. So
Awesome.
that's my dad, and so I was always out canoeing and hiking, and so I knew I wanted to do, not necessarily, river based, but I did do some raft guiding. I through college and in graduate school, I was well, in college and undergraduate, I was a park ranger for the Colorado State Parks. So I always had this connection to Colorado. I worked for Colorado State Parks at Arkansas Headwaters Recreation Area. And so that is a series of parks and boating access points along the upper Arkansas River. Obviously, you guys are right there
Right.
along the lower Arkansas River. So the headwaters of the Arkansas up in the mountains in Colorado. And I checked campgrounds and checked passes and, collected money and counted money and did all that kind of stuff. So I did that for 2 summers. I also worked for the Forest Service for just one summer, actually, also in Colorado. Um, and then part of my internship for my undergraduate degree, I had, through working on the Arkansas River, I had met a bunch of folks who worked for river companies. And what I ended up going down to West Texas to the Big Bend area, and working for a river company down in West Texas to do an internship. So I did guide a little bit, but mostly I was, kind of running the office. I wrote an interpretive guide for the area. So I, went to worked with the park and did all that kind of stuff. So I always kind of stayed connected with the river community. I never became a guy like on the Arkansas or anything like that, but personally, I still do a ton of rafting. That's what my family and I love to do. Um, and then I also, through graduate school, I got to go to Cape Cod and do some research for the National Park Service. That was pretty fun. We were looking at human and people and wildlife interactions on the Cape, so both on the shore as well as some inland freshwater pond areas. And I also, my major graduate research was at Okefenokee Swamp. So I've kind of been all over the place. I popped all over the place. And then I lucked into a permanent job with the Forest Service right as I was finishing graduate school. I my last semester I wasn't taking any classes. I was a TA and I was writing my thesis. I happened to get invited on a river trip on the Grand Canyon that was 30 days long, you guys, like in the middle of winter. It's still crazy to think about that happened. And while I was on that trip, I had some messages saying the Dixie National Forest in southern Utah. The Dixie's not anywhere in the south; it's in southern Utah. The Dixie wants to interview you, and so I actually drove up there after I got off the Grand Canyon because it wasn't that far away, and had my interview, and I got that job. And I feel super fortunate because now that I know how hard it is to get a federal job with the Forest Service, I just totally feel like I was in the right place at the right time. So I worked on the Dixie National Forest for a couple years, and that was 19 years ago. So I've been with the Forest Service for 19 years and have worked on the Dixie, the Medicine Bow route, which is in Colorado and Wyoming. And then I spent a number of years working for the Forest Service in a kind of project branch. So I worked on a number of recreation projects across the Forest Service and across the country, really, from Alaska to Virginia, and that was really fun. So I got to see a lot of the country and a lot of the national forests that way. And now I'm just prior to this position, I was doing a job where I was leading a small interdisciplinary team. So I had a biologist, a hydrologist, a landscape architect, and a NEPA planner doing ski area planning across, mostly in Colorado and Wyoming, but in other states as well that have ski areas in the Forest Service, because most ski areas are on national forest land.
Yeah, I noticed part of my feeds that I get, I noticed that your name popped up on something regarding a snow mitigation plan, and I was like, "Hey, I know her."
Oh,
Um,
cool.
so
Oh,
I don't remember
interesting.
exactly what it was, but I was just like, "Whoa!" It's always neat to have that.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
To say, oh, I know that person.
yeah.
That's
So your family does a lot of kayaking. What other kind of stuff do you and your family do for fun outdoors or
well,
otherwise?
skiing. And I'm telling you, I should be in Arkansas right now to go skiing.
Right. Goodness.
This event, my yeah, as Mike said, my brother and sister-in-law live in Little Rock, so I've been following all the snow, and my parents live in Fort Smith, so following all the snow there. But yeah, we do a lot of downhill skiing, hiking, camping. We love to camp by lakes and go paddleboarding and play in the water and rafting. Those are our main things.
Yeah. So switching back to your job now, I know that it's relatively new, but could you tell us a little bit about what that is, what you do, kind of just some more detail about what that is?
Yeah, so the Continental Divide Trail Administrator, there are, oh gosh, I should know the number, but there are a number of national scenic trails. You probably have heard of the Appalachian Trail. There's also the Pacific Crest Trail, and then there's a number of other national scenic trail as well as national historic trails. So each of those nationally designated trails has an administrator, somebody like me who oversees the management of that trail. So I don't really do the on the ground stuff per se. I'm not out there building trail. I mean, I like to go out and as soon as COVID things get a little more normal, I'll certainly go out and work on projects and work with our volunteers and partners. But I kind of help coordinate. I guess I would call it kind of a director. I'm
Okay.
coordinating, working with. I think there's 15 or 16 national forests. And then there are 4 national parks, as well as a number of Bureau of Land Management offices that the trail crosses, and of course, some private land, private and state land. So about 70% of the trail is on national forest, which is why the Forest Service is the lead agency. A number of the trails are also managed through the National Park Service. The Forest Service only has 6 of these national scenic historic trails, actually, that we're the lead agency for. So really just kind of coordinate and work with the different entities, both the federal and then work with a lot of partners to get the work done on the ground. So the trail itself, there is a trail for those 3,100 miles. Sometimes that trail is on roads. And the idea is to not be on roads, right? To get it off of roads where possible and primarily non-motorized, but that's not exclusively. There are areas where there's where because it's on roads or because it was a motorized trail to begin with, that use. So just trying to figure out where those places we can get it off the roads, where we can do reroutes, ensure that the trail is sustainably designed so that the maintenance and there are no major issues with it. And then I also work with quite a bit with our national trails program, and just help support national efforts. For example, the Forest Service has a national strategy for sustainable trails, and then kind of the policy and guidance. So I work on some policy and guidance stuff as well.
Awesome. So I know this is kind of new, so maybe thinking about your current and maybe your previous position or two, what are some of the things that you really love about working, whether that's with the Forest Service or in the profession? And then maybe what are some challenges that you have related to those positions? I don't like to use the word dislikes as much. I like the word
Yeah, no,
challenges.
I appreciate framing that way. So what I love is Um, and what I would say about working for the Forest Service and probably any land management agency is the mission. Our job is to help people enjoy the outdoors. And the Forest Service specifically having a very multiple use mission where, we are cutting timber and managing for wildlife habitat and, yeah, watershed protection, but working with, all the different folks who are trying to do the best for the land and for the people. And so my personal desire is to connect people to the outdoors and really connect all people to the outdoors. And so provide those opportunities for people to really enjoy the outdoors in whatever way they see fit. And of course, that balance of like, you can't do everything everywhere, and people can't just run around without any sort of management, because that doesn't work. There's conflict and there's resource, so trying to figure out what I had a professor in college at Montana, who called some of these problems wicked and messy. And I still refer back to that a lot. And think about, like, yeah, they're wicked and messy, but it's because people are so passionate. My personal mantra around COVID is that it has shown us what we've already known, that outdoor recreation is essential for people's well-being. And in many places it was deemed an essential activity. So that's what I love. And even within my job, focused on the Continental Bike Trail, I have a lot of opportunity to contribute in other ways. I work with a group, an interagency group that's made up of 6 federal agencies, one of them being the Forest Service, to work on visitor use management,
Mm-hmm.
which are kind of those wicked and messy issues. So that's really fun. And then, as Mike knows, because where we first met, I'm also on the board of the Society of Outdoor Recreation Professionals, SORP. And through that organization, we provide training and professional development, and really support the folks who are doing the work, including students. So I encourage you guys to check that out if Mike hasn't already told you about that organization. Some of the challenges, I think, are working for a large federal agency, a bureaucracy, and I think this applies to any sort of large organization. There's a lot of processes and things that sometimes don't make sense, and things sometimes you have to find creative ways within law, regulation, and policy to get the work done. And sometimes you hear no, right? And sometimes some people their default answer is no, where I try to be, let's try to find a way to yes. And that can be frustrating. I have chosen not to go to be what we call a line officer in the agency. A line officer is a district ranger or a forest supervisor, somebody who can make a decision. Here comes my cat. Somebody who can. So I've chosen specifically not to do that, because I feel like my passion around recreation is what drives me. And as you know, in those types of roles, while I hear from friends who are in those positions, it's very rewarding. There's a lot of the human resources side, employee management, and I've been a supervisor for a long, long time, so it's not about that. But there's also that, I feel like, for me, being a district ranger, it's hard to have your own time. And so, for example, if I was out camping and the fire started and I'd have to immediately leave and go, literally deal with the fire. And so I've chosen to stay very focused on kind of the recreation world, but that also comes with challenges because I have no decision authority. I can make recommendations.
Yeah,
Nobody has to, go with my recommendation. So
sure.
that's one of the challenges.
So you kind of mentioned some different things you do for fun. One of the things I like to ask is, if you weren't in your position, maybe you weren't working for the Forest Service, what would be your dream job, or what would you like to be doing if it wasn't if you're not where you're at now?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I've got kind of 2 aspects of that. One is, like I was saying, I'm really passionate about connecting people to the outdoors. And so I think a dream would be to work with all different types of communities and nonprofits and government agencies to figure out what they have in common and how they can work together to, manage and facilitate people getting outside. So
Yeah.
kind of like a consulting, facilitating role. And then I think, tying on to that, I really enjoy facilitating, and something I've been doing for quite a long time. So facilitating meetings, and I think that would be something else I'd like to do. Just kind of helping groups get to their desired outcome is how
Sure.
I like to say it. And I think when you've seen a good facilitator And I think I'm a pretty good facilitator. There's always room for growth. It's really kind of magical, having somebody who can help, work through the conflict and, maybe help people see where they have those commonalities. So I really enjoy doing that kind of stuff. And I get to do that quite a bit for work, but if I could do that full time, that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm kind of with you. I like the people that are solution focused, and I think that's part of what, you were saying is leading those folks or groups or whatever to the solution. Um, so before we move, I want to get to some stuff for like tips for students and whatnot. But before we move that route, um, could you tell us a little bit about your involvement with SORP and its development over the years, and talk to the students a little bit about that as well?
Yeah. So I have been on the SORP board for 8 years now. And SORP is a national nonprofit organization, but it's a professional organization to serve outdoor recreation professionals. And so one of the, oh my cat, she's trying to walk on the keyboard.
She's
um,
outside.
so one of the things we get asked is, what is an outdoor recreation professional? And we did some, I guess I would call it soul searching as an organization in the last year and a half around what that means, and have done a lot of work around justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. So JEDI, and have kind of recently redefined what an outdoor recreation professional is to include people who yeah, I'm not looking at the actual definition, but people who facilitate and serve outdoor recreation, people who are trying to get manage this outdoor recreation. And I contrast that with kind of where SORP has come from, to Mike's question around when I first joined the board. It was I would say very traditional. The members of SORP were traditionally people like me who have a degree in natural resource or outdoor recreation, who work in the field for federal, state, or local agency, or in academia, like Mr. Bradley, and 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 we have come to realize that there, are lots of people doing this, including people from tourism organizations. And many states and local tourism organizations really recognize the value. I mean, I think for like in Arkansas, Fayetteville and Northwest Arkansas are like the prime example of like, oh my gosh, they've grabbed on to the biking and are really
Absolutely.
promoting that, right? And so those folks who are in the tourism organization but may not have the natural resource background, we're there for them too, to help provide that context of what it means, to balance all of the demands on natural resources, right? And then folks who are maybe again in the nonprofit world, getting there's a lot of groups who are doing trying to get youth and underserved communities outside. So for them, and the traditional people, right? So we're trying to broaden that definition of what outdoor recreation professional means, as well as kind of keep it. We still have to have a container. SORP does, because like I said a few minutes ago with the Forest Service, we can't be everything to everybody. We have to like recognize our capacity and our limits. So our organization has one employee, and that's relatively new. We hired an executive director 3 years ago. And before that, we had a part-time consulting association manager. So very different role. And so that's helped highlight her work is working with policy. She works with a group called the Outdoor Recreation Roundtable, which is a Washington, DC based policy advocacy type of group that includes things like the RV industry and other nonprofits and kind of the big manufacturers in outdoor recreation, as well as, organizations like SORP and American Trails that are, more nonprofit based. Um, so yeah, so that's how it's evolved, and we're really as everyone else has had to do, we've had to shift our, I would say until last year, our primary program was an annual conference, the National Outdoor Recreation Conference, which we still did virtually last year, but it was in person. And so of course we've had to shift and been much more focused on those virtual events, and even this year looking into really relevant webinar series about how to respond to COVID, how to move forward from here with increasing use. And so, yeah, and we will continue to have an in-person conference when it's safe to do so again. Knoxville 2022 is the plan. So,
Sure.
and I haven't given up on Arkansas yet, Mike. So,
Well, we had Laurel on a couple weeks ago for this as
oh, we
well.
did.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't mention that.
Okay. So
So she
you know
talked.
about that. Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
so.
But you have a longer history as SORP, and that's what I
Mhm.
think is valuable as well. And I've definitely preached to the students, so to speak, and they probably say the same thing, the word preach, about the SORP and getting involved in organizations for their professional growth and networking.
Mhm.
Um, to kind of move on to our next segment, this is before. Well, actually, we got a question before we do that, and so who are the main trail users for the Continental Divide Trail? We'll cover that before we move on to the
Yeah,
tips
that's a
and
great
stuff.
question. So you guys probably have heard about people who hike these trails, long distance hikers who do the entire trail. That is a small but important segment, certainly, of the Continental Divide Trail. There are probably 300 to 400 people who do the whole entire trail in a year. That's not that many. So really the main users and the purpose of the trail is to get people out to enjoy this trail. The scenic, as you can imagine, along the Continental Divide, there's some incredible scenery. Everything from desert down in southern New Mexico to certainly the high mountain peaks in Colorado and Wyoming. It goes through Yellowstone, goes right by Old Faithful, and then it ends in Glacier National Park. So really the primary users are the day users, the people who are, doing a couple mile hike or bike ride or whatever it may be, and just wanting to enjoy it. And so I think there's what I've seen in the short time in this position, there's kind of perception that we manage for the long distance hikers, but that's not really true. I mean, it's an opportunity for sure, but it's such a small piece of the use that we're really managing for those kind of day segments and ensuring we have those, great access points. Now, there are some longer segments, certainly through wilderness areas, that you got to work to get to, whether you're a day, whether you're doing a shorter backpack or the through hike. But there are some really accessible ones. For example, right by me, near Loveland Ski Area off of Interstate 70 here in Colorado. It's right along the interstate, but I went cross country skiing there a few weeks ago, and it's just, it's not, you get the road noise, but but it's really accessible, and you're just like, okay, like here's this really cool trail that is right here, very close to me.
And having come from Kentucky previously, that's same thing with the AT. People
Hmm.
think that it's managed for the through hikers, and really it's managed for the folks that are doing the 2 to 5 mile in and out.
Hmm.
Um, okay, so I want to ask for um, what. So a student wants to get into the Forest Service in a variety of different roles, and the Forest Service has a lot of different career paths, and I don't think people realize that either. But what are some tips, and I don't like the word tricks, but what are some things that you might suggest for students looking to follow a similar career path or get into the Forest Service and whatnot?
Yeah, and that's the $24,000 question. But I think as given what I see and what is successful for folks, I think a couple tips. One is be willing to move. And even if your final, like you really want to, stay in Arkansas or wherever it may be, just be willing at first to move. For example, when I took the job in southern Utah in the Dixie National Forest, I didn't know anyone. It was kind of like, wow, what is this place, right? but it was a great way to get in and understand the agency and really work with all the different specialists, the biologists and range management and all that stuff. And so that's what I would say. Be willing to kind of go to the places maybe other people don't want to go. You don't have to stay there forever.
Right.
I think the other thing is look for volunteer and internship opportunities. And so, well, volunteer typically, right, you're not going to get paid, but if you can get that little bit of experience that helps you get your foot in the door. On the other hand, we do have a number of internship opportunities through the Forest Service. We have a Pathways program, and I'm happy to send some links if, for folks who really want to know a little bit more. And then we have also a program called the Resource Assistant Program. And that program gives you more like, I think it's an 11-month internship, and sometimes they get extended. So you do get paid for that. And it's not a whole lot, but there is a stipend involved with that. And that is typically folks who have already, I would say they've already graduated. Sometimes they've even already done a master's degree and are, for example, I have a woman who works part-time on GIS for the Continental Divide Trail, and she came in through the Resource Assistant Program. So right after she finished her master's in GIS, she was able to go through that program. And we work with a number of organizations, for example, Greening Youth Foundation, Hispanic Access Fund, to find interns, for this Resource Assistant Program. And like I said, this Pathways program, there are like student opportunities, things like that. So I definitely encourage, if you're interested in doing this, looking at that. And then, get to know folks in your local, if you really do want to stay locally, get to know some of the folks in your local. And that's where I'd say if you really don't want to move, go talk to the folks on the local ranger district. And you've got two great national forests right around you, Ozark Cypress and Washita. So there's a lot of opportunities. So I would say go talk to them and talk about volunteer opportunities. Are there things that you can do to kind of help understand what their needs are in that local area?
So, kind of along those lines too, as these students are developing their resumes, there's a lot of different resume advice out there. Is there any tips or tricks on how to develop that, or how to format? I don't know if format's the right word I'm looking for, but I know, um, sometimes people say list everything you've ever done, so it's more of like a CV, and some people say shorter is better. A one-page resume. What are your thoughts on that as related to outdoor recreation, Forest Service, and whatnot?
For a federal job, Forest Service, Park Service, any of that, longer is better. Which is totally counterintuitive to like how private organizations do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say like pretty much list everything. And how it works in the federal government is that there's a human resources group of folks who review resumes before it even gets sent to the hiring people, to the hiring manager. So for example, if I was hiring someone, before I even get it, somebody in human resources is reviewing it and looking for keywords before they even, to see if the person is qualified before they even send it to me. Now for entry-level positions, that's, it's not a high bar. If you've got some classes and things like that, that's totally, that's going to count. Not even having a degree for, say, a GS4 or 5 level position. But anything you think is related, I would put it in there, and it does make it really long. I every time I look at my resume, I can't believe how long it is. And when I review them, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so much in here, right? But it does help so that you have those kind of, if somebody's looking for some keywords or key information, if you get a one page, it's going to be hard, probably going to be hard to pull that out.
Sure, sure. So, overall, beyond like the Forest Service specifically, um, when you look at outdoor recreation as a career, what are some things that you think are important for outdoor recreation professionals to make an impact and have a legacy in outdoor recreation? So, as these students move into their they're going to be in the early 20s probably when they enter the career field, and hopefully they have a long and great career. What are some things that you think they should be looking at and thinking about as far as a professional to have an impact, legacy, however we want to frame it?
Yeah, great question. And I've thought quite a bit about this, and again, as I was talking with SORP, we're trying to figure out like how do we serve this really diverse group of folks. What I think is important um, is understanding. I'll say it this way: understanding human behavior, right? Because it's all about people and their relationships with each other and the relationships with the land, with nature. And sometimes that's not very logical, right? We know that people are not really logical. So so and I think that's it's an interesting thing to say for somebody who works for the Forest Service, which is a very natural resource based agency, right? Like some folks still think that we're all about we're all about the what we call the ologists, the biologists or hydrologists, or and not to say that's not an important part of it, but it doesn't matter what you do in an agency like the Forest Service, you need to understand people and be able to relate to people. Even if you're an introvert, extrovert, doesn't matter. You just kind of have to be able to relate and understand. And so that's where, yeah, and I think being able to facilitate and convene. I mean, you hear me use those words, and you can see that that's important things that I kind of do. But I think it really helps to be able to have the technical background, but also understand how to work with people in different in settings and environments. And I'll also say, because a lot of the work we do is with the public. That is who
Mm-hmm.
we serve. We serve the American public. And being able to relate to people from different backgrounds, whether it's somebody who is following their sword, I'm going to ride my ATV everywhere, or whether it's somebody who's like, I would never even think about sitting on an ATV. I only hike, right? You kind
Yeah.
of have to understand both perspectives, and again, where to find that common ground. So I think that that's my biggest is really honing in on the kind of the social, and we call them soft skills because it is art and science, right? You can certainly learn a lot of it, but you also have to practice. And I think one of my a piece of advice I would give is to observe people, somebody you think does it really well, and kind of see what works for them and adapt that for yourself.
Yeah. Well, Rachel, that's all I have. And I know that the students have had a couple of questions we've kind of embedded here. Before we let you go, is there any parting words of wisdom?
Um, I think there's a huge opportunity, and like I said, what COVID has revealed in my mind is that outdoor recreation is essential, and I think it's just going to be more and more important to have folks who understand all these different dynamics, so that we can, because there's not going to be any more land, right? There's going to be more people. There's not going to be more land. So, folks like you guys who are, working towards providing and managing and balancing. And so there's just I don't think it's going to go away, right? And I think that having I actually, just as a little bit of an aside, I recently participated in an international survey for forest education. And it was all the, I don't know if you saw it, Mike, but it was all the kind of like all, I mean, traditional forestry and forest management to outdoor recreation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think one of the challenges is that there aren't as many students in these programs, and so I think that means two things. One, because of the certainly increasing use and demand on our natural resources, and specifically for outdoor recreation, we're going to need more people to be in these kind of management administration positions. But two, that means there's probably some opportunities, right? That as And there are a lot of folks retiring, at least from the Forest Service right now. So I think there will be continue to be more opportunities, and we're in I think we're in a place where there's a strong recognition, and we have the outdoor recreation industry, and we have other organizations that are helping elevate the importance of it at a national level.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much first. I really appreciate it. I know we'll probably talk offline. Um, but again, thank you so much. I'll let you go and continue your day. Please stay safe and warm and all that
You
stuff.
too.
And if you need anything, just reach out to me.
Same thing, and yeah, any of the students, if you'd like to talk one-on-one, I'm available for that.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Rachel.
Yep, thanks. Have a good
Yep.
day.
You too. Bye bye.